Hey, yo! What up, man? How you guys doing? Big news. What up, Nemesis? Ya motherfucker. Big day, everyone. Time for Teletubbies. Hello, puppet. It has just been revealed. Why can't I ever just remember his name? Memento. I think followed by The Prestige. Ooh, but personal favorite? Personal favorite, I think I'll go Memento Dark Knight. Personal favorite, I would go. My bad. Sorry. Music's over. Personal favorite, I think I would go Memento, then Dark Knight. I actually highly rate Batman Begins, too. Let's be honest. I highly rate Batman Begins as well. I think Dark Knight Rises the weaker of the three. But I like Batman Begins. But in terms of my overall ranking, I think it would be something like Memento, Dark Knight, Prestige, Dunkirk, Inception, Batman Begins, Interstellar, Dark Knight Rises, Insomnia. Am I missing anything? Am I missing one? Tenet below Insomnia. I think I might. I already said Interstellar. I think I put Tenet below Insomnia. Where does Shrek rank on this list? Oppenheimer ranks above Insomnia. I think that's right. All right, folks, we're about to take a look at the Ethan Klein lawsuit against Denims. There's some updates. People wanted me to take a look at it. Won't be a super long stream. We're going to focus more on the law. But before I do that, I'm going to force you all, and we're going to do this together, okay? So this is going to be us together because we're going to get into some juicy legal updates. And so I want your mind with mine. I want our minds to meld, and I want you to do one thing for me to make me the happiest and most lucky streamer there's ever been. Now, what I want you to do is very, very simple. It's something that doesn't require much of anything. And I know you people, you're good people. All of you are very good people, the best people there has ever been. I want you to go to the website, youtube.com, all right? It's already done. It's already been done. And you go to this YouTube video called Landlord Fraud Poisons Baltimore Children. You know what? It's the video we're watching right now. Hang on. Just 1 second. Oh, wait. I'm not going to be able to. Just give me 1 second. I'll show you. I'll show you the whole thing. Okay, here we go. Okay, and then that works. This is the title of it. And then you can just see it. If I just do there, now it should be. Okay, perfect. So now you're seeing this. And you see this like. You're just going to click like on this. And you're going to show your support. And we're going to watch it together, okay? We're going to watch it together. It's not that long. We're going to watch it at 1.4. And then we'll get right into the news. Landlord fraud is poisoning Baltimore. I don't know anything about this. This is the first I'm hearing about it. This is the first I'm hearing about it. Okay, I'll share it in the chat after when we're doing the legal analysis. I'll put the link. Actually, if I have a mod, I don't ever like ask my mods to do anything, really. Don't clip that. Don't clip that. I do ask them to do some stuff, but about like posting links in the chat. So if I have a mod somewhere who can link this video to pin it in the YouTube chat or something, that would be wonderful. And with just like a nice little message, I don't know if you're able to do this, it says, please go like and share this video from Dylan Birds and RGR or something like that, something to that effect. But we're going to watch it together here. We're going to do amazing things together. And then we'll get right into the legal updates, because you guys want to know about Ethan Klein's versus Denims, don't you? You want to know about, wait, does Denims have a case on one of her claims? Does she have a case on one of her claims? You want to know that, don't you? You're going to have to watch. You're going to have to watch on.
Some good news from this year's state lead poisoning
report.
Lead
poisoning. Oh, my God.
4 Maryland children were tested for lead last year, and fewer were found to be poisoned. Great news.
Yeah. This is the 2009 Maryland Department of the Environment annual report on lead poisoning in the state of Maryland, and the news this year is very good.
Can I just say, what a great mustache, and the news is very good. So I assume we've done something about this lead issue.
They have been collecting lead poisoning data in Maryland for 17 years. This year, there were fewer people poisoned by lead in Maryland than in any year.
Look at that. Ends the 2009, but that's pretty good data.
Since they started collecting.
From 33% back in 1993 down to 1.8% in 2009.
Instead of helping me, she helped herself and moved me in something that wasn't fit to live in. And how I found out I had to lose my mother August the 8th of 21.
Some good news from this year's state lead poisoning report.
But I still spend $229 to get abused, to get neglected, to live in conditions, to get sealed carpet monoxide. That man's trying to kill us.
And the news this year is very good.
In favor of your law ain't worth nothing that the paper is printed on if you don't start doing some enforcement. The first law is not being enforced. I gave you some handouts. I did a little study on 4 blocks in the city, in Remington, and I've been doing that study for over 5 years. And on December the 19th, I put in 39 complaints. Thank you for finally listening and allowing me to do it online.
Yes.
Took years to do that.
Yes.
39 complaints, 12, 19, 25. 28 are still not compliant. 15 still have not been investigated. We're talking about 70 days later, Housing Department. You still haven't investigated them. 8 of them you rejected.
Yep.
Those 8, I gave you a paper on who they are. Look at the characteristics that they have. None of them are lead paint registered.
I was a landlord for 40 years, never evicted anyone, never had a violation notice. But I've seen some predatory landlords that are disgusting. My own daughter had one who, 90 days.
So are they poisoning the children? We have some context maybe from a chatter. This is Baltimore. This is an explicitly black focused issue. I might have to transition to the Discord for this one. Maybe we can do it at some point, but I just want to watch the video in its full. But it looks like this is an issue related to Baltimore and lead poisoning.
Renewals should be illegal. They mandate.
And folks who are just coming in, we're taking a look at this video from Dylan Burns. It would mean the world if you could just go to the video, support it, repost it if you can. We're taking a look at it right now, and then afterward we'll get into the Ethan Klein versus Denims lawsuit.
And by the way, most tenants don't have the wherewithal to defend themselves or to know the law. So it's up to you to try to protect them.
Housing has got to step up to the plate and do something about this.
That's right.
There are a couple other things that I'm wondering deep down inside if you all aren't still continuing to try to protect the landlords.
Yeah.
Because you haven't enforced this law. You also haven't changed or done with, complained before, that the first 2 or 3 citations on a property go to the tenant. Tenants don't pay those. We also can't see what the fines are and how much fines are and whether they pay. You all are hiding and protecting landlords. Exactly. Realize that, accept it, and be honorable human beings in the city of Baltimore and do something about this. Yes. You have to tell housing to do this. They refuse to change.
Not many people want to drag themselves to the city council building after a long workday. But the chairs were about full. Negligent landlords managing derelict properties was enough of an issue to get these people out to testify their lived experience in front of their neighbors in person and watching on public television on their couches. Baltimore's walls were painted in toxic lead paints with no restraint until its toxicity became widespread knowledge, and its use was banned in Baltimore in 1950, almost 30 years before the rest of the country. But by 1950, Baltimore was already a historic American city, with the red bricks of its row houses long ago laid. Droves of buildings had already been painted with lead, housing families all across the city. But as time went on, and newer housing projects were built without lead paint.
Now, why did they paint with lead?
Older properties remained.
Maybe they had some like good properties, right? Just like asbestos had like the good fire retardant properties.
Properties that may sometimes be cheaper to have quick fixes for than actually remedy the lead paint issue. Even better for the bottom line, if you don't have to make any remedies at all. And a motivation to get around lead poisoning standards and other health-related regulations.
Well, we have heat, but the plumbing is not draining properly either. The home leaks, so we have weatherization issues as well. So heating and cooling is challenging and more expensive, of course, for us. We have, towels tucked around the door jambs and to keep the cold out. The leaking has caused mold in the basement as well. We're fortunate in that we don't have small children in the house who would be more susceptible to those kind of unsafe conditions.
I'm a scientist. Can you imagine like trying to shame someone because they don't know what the properties are of lead paint that would cause people to paint with lead? Are you actually asking why they painted with lead? Yeah, I'm actually asking. I don't know everything. Are you being hyperbolic? I don't know what's hyperbolic about that. I literally don't know why they painted with lead paint. And we got some answers. I don't know why you're always like this snarky character where I can't just like ask a genuine question and be vulnerable. Like, okay, I don't know what lead does with what lead properties it has such that it was a good paint. I understand lead can poison you. All right. I'm asking what is the good thing about it?
But as it is, my husband has these veteran respiratory issues, so the mold is certainly an added concern for us specifically. We later learned from neighbors that the prior tenants had a lead issue, that their infant had tested positive for lead. After we moved in, he did have a lead inspector come, and I heard him telling the lead inspector what to say on the report, and I heard him tell the lead inspector a date to put on the report, thus backdating the report. So I'm assuming he filed a fraudulent report, and I think they're
getting the runaround or whatever.
Was required to have this report at that time, because it was 2016, due to the prior tenant complaint. But since that falsified inspection, there have been no inspections of the property.
He grew up in Baltimore, and for years, Kayshawn Burrell never realized the lead paint surrounding him inside his apartment was poisoning him.
Well, I had an experience when I was like 15, and it takes an impact on me today, and it's hard for day-to-day life to deal with certain things.
The impacts of lead poisoning have been well documented for decades now, which adds to the shock of a 43-year-old Maryland-certified inspector named Rodney Barkley pleading guilty to criminal charges for issuing fake lead paint certificates.
Rodney Ryan Barkley,
wait, what? Fake ones?
For his 31 charges, got sentenced to 2 years of probation. He will never
see
the inside of a cell for the irreversible damage he has done to the children of Baltimore. 1,400 lead paint inspections,
like literally falsified reports
and certifications issued by Barkley were revoked by the Maryland Department.
The music is a 10 out of 10
of environment.
Not fake lead, fake reports that are like clearing things, right? I'm assuming
1,500 chances for a family's health to be damaged, with some homes having children who have been confirmed to have elevated levels of lead in their blood. What message does not 1 day in jail send to other prospective criminals who would take kickbacks and issue fake reports under laws that have since not yet been reformed? What can be done to deter people like Rodney Barkley from getting kickbacks at the expense of the health of the children across Baltimore and the rest of Maryland? How can oversight of these private inspectors be developed? How can tenants be empowered to deal with negligent landlords managing derelict properties, often without the proper paperwork, that they would never put their own families in? Where walls can shed lead paint like dogs shed hair. This has been an issue prevalent enough to turn people out at City Hall.
That was a sick simile. What a simile.
Managing derelict properties, often without the proper paperwork, that they would never put their own families in. Where walls can shed lead paint like dogs shed hair.
Tight.
This has been an issue prevalent enough to turn people out at City Hall, but is one that is difficult to report on due to the fears tenants have of possible retaliation from their landlords for speaking out. No matter my best efforts, I was unable to get any tenants to agree to come on camera to speak about their experience due to this fear of eviction or legal trouble.
Right. Because if they start talking shit, they might get in trouble. I wonder what their leases say about if they're allowed to do certain things or say certain things.
I found it easier to get those in war zones to open up about their lives, even if threatened by displacement and immediate death.
In Ukraine. He had a easier time in Ukraine to have candor or whatever.
Speak to those afraid of their landlords, meaning that if we wanted to get...
I love that, like, that juxtaposition, right? Of the Ukrainians, like, under fire and whatever. And they're more fearful of... I guess the threat from the other side is omnipresent from Russia, right? So maybe there's like a insidious way in which you need your landlord in a way you don't need the Russians. But maybe that's just the capitalist frame of thinking, huh? You need your landlord. That's what they want you to think.
To the bottom of recent reports of lead poisoning in Baltimore, we need to talk to experts.
I'm Ruth Ann Norton. I'm the president and CEO of the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. But today's standard
for environmental action is 3.5 micrograms per deciliter. But I want to remind everybody, the answer is 0. There is not one bit of positive outcome for ingestion of lead into the system or exposure to lead. It will increase kidney damage and hypertension. It will increase cardiac damage and cardiac deaths. And most of all, damages the brain and disrupts reading and reasoning abilities. So kids will not achieve grade level reading in school. They're going to be 6 to 7 times more likely to drop out of school, earn $2 million.
I wonder what's the like metabolic pathway for lead to mess with your head. Oh, sorry, Al. Is that a stupid question to ask? I wonder what it is about lead that poisons you. If that's okay to ask.
Over the course of a lifetime and have chronic health care interactions and may have impact on violent, aggressive, and criminal behavior. It also causes low birth weight, miscarriages, and stillbirths at a much, much higher rate. And for adult men who are exposed, it has a high rate of impotency. So it has a lifelong arc around neurological, cardiac, and reproductive systems. About 84% of the children who are poisoned in the state has proven to
a
come
real
from
answer. Lead is a potent systemic toxin with no safe level of exposure in the human body. Once it enters the system, it acts as a molecular imposter, mimicking calcium, zinc, and iron. Oh, so it like kind of boxes the needed things out, maybe? Sorry, that's just my simpleton mind. Lead passes the blood-brain barrier, says KTC.
Deteriorated chipping, peeling, and flaking paint in the home. Toxic leaded dust is the...
Is that why we had so many serial killers? Is that one of the theories? Because there's a theory of serial killers, which is like, well, we can just catch them now before they're serial killer. And then I've heard that there's like a theory of serial killers, which is like, they all were lead poisoned. That would be crazy if that's true.
Pathway of poisoning. There are important other and collateral sources: soil, pottery, spices, water. But it's paint that has been the overwhelming culprit to damage the brain.
That is a theory.
We have focused mainly on rental housing because there's more ability, there's more rules in place about property owners who are putting housing on the market for rent, and there's better levers to address this. So it means that when a family goes to move into a pre-1978 house, they are given information that that owner should have addressed all chip and peeling, flaking paint, and all impact of the house that may be causing paint to chip, peel, or flake. And it doesn't matter, actually, whether it's lead paint or not. The state has assumed if the house is built before 1978, the state has a legal presumption that it's lead.
Wow.
The owner has a responsibility to prove that it's not or comply with the law. One of the most challenging, frustrating, disappointing things of the past year has been the case of Rodney Barkley, from Green Environmental, who was issuing approximately 1,400 basically valid certificates.
Wait, is there any liability for the people buying the certificates, or is this guy just like a one-man show? Like, he was supposed to be doing inspections, or did the owners know anything? It just seems crazy to me that, like, does it just extend to that one guy, or is there any other, like, consequences for the people who are presumably the market for the fraudulent inspections, right? Or the fraudulent certificates? And then only 2-year probation, like, that just seems wild for the amount of certificates, right? The amount of damage done. And to think, like, you get to jail, you're in jail longer for, like, doing pot.
Using properly calibrated equipment and potentially issuing
in some states
that for inspections that never happened. To me, it's a criminal enterprise that he put forth, and should have been prosecuted fully on a criminal basis, on an economic basis, and should have gotten the highest penalties in the law because they broke the trust of communities and families on a law.
Yeah, I mean, that is why corruption is so horrible, right? Because it just makes everything questionable. When you break down that trust, when it comes to like the government even running inspections, those are big societal costs. They're implicit costs that are, it's not a free lunch. These fake inspections, man, these are real things.
Have many good aspects to it and has proven to be successful, right? We know that he was doing this work in Pennsylvania, in Delaware, in the District of Columbia, in Virginia.
Oh, so he was going all over the place. Jeez.
And Maryland. Right. So what I don't know, but I think should be looked at, is did these surrounding states in the district also face what we face here in Baltimore, which is 1,400 invalidated certificates by this one company? Every inspector holds in their hands the safety of the next child that moves in that unit.
True, yeah.
Far none. But this was so big. This wasn't 1 or 2 certificates.
This is 1,400 certificates that have to be redone, re-inspected. So there's a lot of cost in that. And there have been children poisoned in the units.
I'm assuming this is well researched, by the way, so I don't know anything about this guy, but this is the first I'm hearing of it, but I'm assuming that they did their due diligence.
That did not have lead poisoning before they moved into the units. That should not be taken lightly, because that is a cost that all of us will bear with and for that child, and that child will bear for their lifetime.
So there are children that were in these units.
Dylan was there. This is a Dylan exclusive.
That have been found to have lead poisoning.
Elevated levels.
Elevated levels. These children that have been shown to have elevated levels of lead in their system, potentially thousands of other people, we really don't know for sure. He was given 31 charges. How much time is he going to spend in prison for that?
None. And to me, that's obscene.
While there is no quick solution, there is legislation before the City Council, co-sponsored by City...
Ice out. We love an ice out. An ice out. Would you call this a cardigan? Would you call this a cardigan? What would you call this? But we love this. This is a great thing.
Councilwoman Odette Ramos that tries to address some of these issues.
I think it's a major issue everywhere, but in Baltimore, we've been trying to do something about it for several years. So in 2019, the first bill passed to create our landlord licensing law that mandated that there would be inspections of every rental property and that it would all be posted on the portal, etc. I don't think that anybody anticipated the two major things that have happened since then. One is the amount of fraud, where people are uploading documents that are not actually truthful, and two, that only less than a third of our rental properties are actually licensed, so that people aren't even going through the process of getting licensed or getting the inspections, or they were licensed at one point and just never got relicensed. Okay, so we still have a lot of properties that are in seriously bad shape because we need to address this issue. Hi, I'm Odette Ramos. I represent the 14th District in the Baltimore City Council. Council President put in legislation last term that works with...
Felt like that should have been edited before everything, but...
tenants in apartments that are 20 or more units, and so we're encouraging everybody to call 311 to be able to get a city inspection, not a third-party inspection, to be able to document what's wrong. And
right, because when you have all this fraud, you have to not just prosecute it, but go back and check where the lead's at, bro, right?
Make sure that person can be cited. And so currently the landlords can be cited for not having licenses, they can also be cited for not having registration, and they can be cited for bad conditions. And so the best thing right now for people to do is just to continue to call 311 to document. Now, there have been some frustrations with the reactions from 311 in terms of getting somebody to come out. And there's also renters that are afraid of retaliation and don't always want to rock the boat because they don't want to be evicted, because we don't have good cause eviction legislation now. So it's been very difficult, I think, to do this. Now, there are a lot of people that are doing the right thing, get properly licensed. We're not trying to address those. We're really talking about the people that are trying to skirt around the issue.
The bad
My
apples.
legislation is very comprehensive. It tries to solve all of these problems in one fell swoop. Actually, the best thing about the bill is something that the Department of Housing and Community Development actually suggested, and that is for the most egregious violators having multiple citations and refusing to get them taken care of, the city can take the rental property to receivership. And so we have receivership for vacant properties, but this is something new, frankly, that other cities use, so that these egregious violators will be taken to court and then could be taken to what's called a receiver if the judge finds that they're absolutely in violation and they're not doing anything about it. And then that third party receiver will bring the building up to code and then sell it to a new owner. So literally we're saying to the really bad actors, if you keep being bad actors, we will make sure you're not doing
property.
Okay? So that's key number one. It's extremely important. The second thing is that we're asking for more information to understand who really owns these properties, because sometimes they're hiding under LLCs. The other piece is that
the background noise, I will just say, the background noise, it's a bit distracting.
Pay the water bill. So what we're seeing is that they'll charge tenants for the water bill but not pay the water bill. And so as a condition of your license, you're going to pay the water bill, okay? There's also going to be audits. So up to 200 properties per year, which I think is pretty high, are going to get an audit from the Department of Housing and Community Development to look at all their paperwork.
It is crazy that we're still dealing with mesothelioma from asbestos and the lead stuff, even literal decades after we discovered all of these issues. That's how long it takes for us to get our shit together.
To just go in the building, all of that. So that's really important, because right now we're the only city that uses third-party inspectors for that rental licensing inspection, okay? So if we're going to continue to do that, we need to make sure that we have measures in place that are actually going to hold the inspector accountable, as well as the landlord. So these audit provision is going to be very, very important as well. We're also making sure that the landlord, since they're going to have to get licensed and renewed every 2 years, they can't use the same inspector every time, right? Up to 4
new
months.
inspectors.
So that's going to minimize that piece of fraud as well. And so those are some of the main things. We also have a provision in there to make sure that you're going to lose your license if you
That's
intimidate
crazy.
our immigrants by saying that you're going to call ICE. Okay, and there's lots of other provisions about how you can lose your license.
I guess I do have.
That's crazy that people are basically using the Trump administration ICE policies to just like fuck with people for unrelated things.
Personal question I'm interested in. I know when it comes to the case with the inspector, who is of course not working for the city but working as a private individual, gets 31 charges against him, ultimately gets 2 years probation. Do you think that type of penalty is a strong enough deterrent for other bad actors?
No, that should have been, that is not. And so I think what we're trying to do here with building these cases, doing these audits, making sure that not only are they, prosecuted through the same avenues, but again, they're just not going to be able to do business in the city. One of the things that's in our bill also is that if you're an inspector that's initially in our program and continue to violate, continue to have these challenges where right after one property has their license, then 30 days later there's major violations, you're going to get off this list and you won't be able to do business in the city. So I think that's a really important piece too. It's not just the landlord that we're trying to go after, it's also the inspectors that are not doing the right thing.
There is a vote on the Safe Homes Now bill.
Yes.
On May 12th. Well, certainly not all-encompassing.
That's tomorrow. That's tomorrow. There's a vote tomorrow.
Would strengthen oversight. With or without its passage, delinquent landlords will keep doing business in Maryland. They will continue to try to get around regulations meant to protect the health of those they house. There must be a culture of accountability for those who avoid maintenance that grinds down the wellness of their tenants, as those with often little knowledge of the legal system are tied up in litigation and waiting in completely avoidable decay.
Is that
Housing,
lead?
the center of one's own life instability, must be safe from toxic poisons banned in the city
True.
over 75 years ago.
These motherfucking landlords. These goddamn landlords. This is like some FTL music. Holy moly. Well, folks, please go signal boost that. Dylan and RGR sent me this. They want to get this to more eyes, this issue of lead poisoning in Baltimore. So it would mean the world to me if you do that on my behalf. And yeah, appreciate all you guys watching that with me. Thank you all for watching that. Okay, let's get to the legal battle. The legal battle. Okay, here we go. I'll get right to it. Okay, so folks, this review is not going to be so much about what I have debated a lot in the months prior, which is like the morality and ethics of bringing the lawsuit. And if for those of you who are not like clued in, Ethan Klein of H3 like sued 3 content creators who reacted to some of his content, including prominently this one titled The Content Nuke, which is kind of like a takedown video of Hassan Piker. Okay? And he sued them for copyright infringement. My position was always that the lawsuits in general are very strong, in that I think that there's a good plausible claim of copyright infringement. That is still my position, even after these filings, as you'll see why. But these are some interesting filings that we're going to look into. My position on the ethics of bringing the lawsuits was that Ethan Klein lied about his motivations for bringing the lawsuit, that the filings are filled with a lot of vanity statements, a lot of pompous statements, a lot of unhinged statements, a lot of images of Hitler, at least one image of Hitler and Nazis, and basically unhinged for a bunch of reasons. So I didn't like the filings in terms of professionalism. I didn't think that it was a hinged filing in that respect. But I think it stated a cause of action. Now, one of the cases against Casey Tron has been dismissed pursuant to a settlement agreement. One I don't really know much about. That's the one against Frogan. And then one is against Denims, which a lot of people are taking as like the lead lawsuit. And I think this also has the Reddit mods like attached, where there has been some movement on some subpoenas that were issued to Reddit to get like the identities of some of these mods. Okay, so those are the big overviews. What are we doing here? Denims filed a motion for judgment on the pleadings, basically testing the legal sufficiency of the claims prior to judgment, prior to trial. And that's what we're going to take a look at. It's a dispositive motion practice, and we're going to take a read at the principal brief, the opposition, and the reply, and I'll show you why there are some interesting legal issues here. Ultimately, I think that there's a strong case for Ethan Klein, but I don't think that the main copyright infringement cause of action against Denims is so clear-cut that there isn't a chance she could win. Note that the judgment on the pleadings motion, I think, pertains exclusively to the content nuke reaction stream. There's another work that Ethan Klein registered in copyright, which was like an addendum video or the countdown video related to the nuke video. And that specific video was registered like after this whole thing began, with some people speculating, including myself, that it was included in Denim's cause of action to make sure that there was at least one surefire infringement claim. And I think it's a pretty close to surefire infringement claim for that the countdown stream or whatever. So I think, if I recall, this only deals with the content nuke cause of action. Okay, so let's take a look at this, and we'll note any snark. This case is about a live streamer on the interactive social media platform Twitch who is defending herself against a copyright infringement lawsuit for doing what live streamers online do: watch material posted online and react critically and mockingly to a live audience who, in this case, followed along and participated in a contemporaneous live chat. As alleged in plaintiff TED Entertainment's perplexingly long, true, 79-page copyright infringement complaint, Denims is one of a large community of online actors who, through host platforms like Twitch, engage with their online audience through live streams to discuss trending issues of public interest, public controversy, and global affairs. TED Entertainment, through its owners and the widely known YouTuber Ethan Klein, filed this action seeking statutory damages against Denims, alleging her live stream reaction to the tragic comic documentary. I love the use of scare quotes there, or it's real quotes, but it's kind of like a snarky little quote. Documentary entitled "Content Nuke Hassan Piker," and basically that it's infringement. It is undisputed that Denims live streamed the nuke on her Twitch page shortly after it was posted, and critically appraised the documentary before her audience, who followed the discussion and made their own comments in a live chat, both on the nuke itself and on Denim's own commentary. Denims did not otherwise repost or republish the nuke, according to the pleadings. This case concerns Denim's one-time live stream reaction to the nuke documentary, so we're limiting the scope of Denim's even alleged liability to one usage, right? Which was the copying related to her live stream that she did one time. The focus of the 102-minute documentary is the controversial political ideologies of the complaint alleges the alt-left Twitch megastar Hassan Piker regarding the Israel-Palestine conflict. The film aims to expose how Hassan radicalizes people online to be anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli, and criticizes Twitch as a platform that, according to TED Entertainment, should be ashamed for platforming radical left points of view such as Piker's. The nuke, other than openly being a hit piece on Piker, consists essentially of Klein's positions and musings on certain geopolitical issues, political ideology, and current events related to the conflict in the Middle East. As alleged in the complaint, the day the nuke was posted to TEI's YouTube channel H3H3 Productions, Denims put out a live stream on her Twitch page where she watched herself for the first time and reacted to the nuke. During her live stream reaction, Denims paused the nuke 211 times to interject with real-time commentary and criticism. She also engaged directly with her live audience via a real-time chat contemporaneous with her live reaction. Denims' critique of the nuke ran 235 minutes, 2.5 times longer than the original. Some of Denim's commentary pauses ran as long as 8 minutes, many of them ranged between 1 and 5. On 4 occasions, Denims pulled the nuke completely off screen, pulled up other video content related to the subject matter at hand, and at one point, for up to 6 minutes, watched and discussed that other content with her audience. So one thing to note here is, one of the reasons why I doubted Ethan Klein's sincerity regarding the purpose of his lawsuit is that he kind of sold this whole thing to be in defense of the React community. But let's be honest here. When it comes to the standard of reaction content on the internet, if this is infringement, then basically I would say 99% of reaction content on these platforms is infringement. And the unfortunate conclusion might be that that is the case, right? In which case, a lawsuit targeting this kind of like, again, I want to stress, this is above what is standard in reaction community content. I say that as a participant in and watcher of reaction content. Most people don't stop as much as I do, or as much as Denims does. I think someone else who stops a lot is Hutch. He stops a lot, I think, from what I recall. So whatever this is, right? This is above and beyond what is typical in most reaction streams. So what does that leave you with in terms of a conclusion? That whatever decision that comes out of here, to the extent that it's successful for Ethan's cause of action on this specific claim, and remember, there's two works. There's the nuke, and what I'm styling the non-nuke. The non-nuke. And this is about the nuke stuff. If this is infringement, then like, holy crap, there's just rampant infringement everywhere all the time, all at once. Okay? And so that undermines the notion that this is going to defend against Sony and Disney. This is Ethan's words, his claims, by setting a precedent that everyone can rally behind. Because, of course, this is going to implicate the majority of the React community. And people fought me just like they're fighting me on the centrist conversation, just like they fought me in all these. Oh, thank you so much, Matt, NLT. Just like they're fighting me in all these different unhinged communities. They fought me tooth and nail. They said, Pisco. They said, Pisco. That can't be true. That can't be true. You're just trying to sweep. You're just trying to sweep for Denims. It is so obvious at this point. It's beyond parody. The amount of crap, and you guys, half of you were there, I received for this observation. And here you have it, right? These are just objective measures of the amount of time and pauses. And there's other, by the way, later on here, visual graphics that are really informative there. And I'm not saying, by the way, that I think it is an infringement just because it's longer, okay? I'm just saying, in virtue of what is standard in the reaction community, this is above that standard, okay? And I recently saw a clip of Ethan Klein saying something like, look at how much longer my thing is from that. And so on Ethan's own lights, this would be fair use. On Ethan's own lights. I just want to be clear about that. On Ethan's own lights, it would be fair use. Now, there's a reason you should doubt whether Ethan's conclusion is correct as a matter of law. And I do, by the way. I do doubt it. But not to the point where I'm saying it's implausible that she could win this specific case. I don't think that she will win the non-nuke case. But I think it's plausible, by which I think I've stated, I think 78% it will be infringement. But I think that she could win. There's a decent chance what I'm calling like 22%. This is just me. These are just random arbitrary numbers. This is my gut. I'm not putting any kind of like, there's not like objectively true measures. There's just, I haven't done any kind of empirical analysis. It's just my gut feelings here. My gut feelings. And you'll see why. But basically, it puts to bed the notion that there's some principled legal distinction here. For example, to compare Denims against XQC, right? As between Denims and XQC, there is no, as a legal matter, comparison between XQC and Denims. Denims content reaction is just like far and away, way less likely to be considered non-fair use than XQC, who like self-admittedly so. And again, as a legal matter, what is the big takeaway there? Not that Denims has a straightforward case on fair use, but that the explanation given by Ethan Klein is implausible. That's what is obvious now, and beyond the point of any conceivable. And I had everyone try to fight me on it. Now it's almost taken, yeah, okay, Ethan lied. He lied, very clearly lied. And okay, you can say, well, I'm okay with my content creator lying and doing lawsuits on false pretenses. That's okay. I mean, you can say it if you want, but at this point, I just think that the course of conduct here has vindicated my position, which will surprise no one. The content of Denim's commentary range, indeed this was a live event, but the quintessence of her comments were critical and derisive. Everyone agrees with that. Of Klein himself, of the production of the nuke. And by the way, this is undisputed by Ethan himself. He characterizes, as you'll see in some devastating quotes. When I say devastating, I just mean really bad looking quotes. I don't know that it'll kill the case. Like I said, I still, by and large, believe this is going to be found to be infringement. Of the production of the nuke and of the substantive messaging presented by the film, which Denims opposed and rebutted during her live stream, right? The whole time saying, this is not true, while the complaint applying a super hyper technical analysis of Denim's reaction livestream contends Denim's commentaries do not do, quote, enough to constitute fair use, in the other breath, TI in the complaint concedes that Denims makes a highly transformative use of the nuke, using it for the exact opposite purpose of TEI's purpose in making the nuke, to radicalize her audience to be anti-Israel along with defending Piker. That seems like a concession that it's transformative. Now, I understand that they have the words in here, inconsistently highly transformative. That's in the complaint somewhere as well. But it's a really bad admission. We want to stress here. Ethan Klein's own lawyers, they construed the Denim's reaction as, quote, highly transformative and doing it for the exact opposite purpose of TED Entertainment, right? We were trying to promote pro-Hassan content, and they were trying to, by the way, not just anti-Israeli in the actual complaint, they say anti-Semitic. So I'm not sure that Denims would concede on anti-Semitism or anti-whatever, right? Like, but anti-Hassanism. They omit here anti-Semitism, which is included there. But that's a pretty useful admission to be able to call upon, right? You conceded that it's highly transformative. Why in that? And it's not really convincing to me to say, well, in a limited way, it was highly transformative. Huh? In a limited way, it was highly transformative? In an inconsistent way? What you're describing is like a big picture purpose difference. So at some points they were trying to radicalize her audience, but at some points she wasn't. In other words, what I'm trying to suggest here is that the qualification that's present here, which is like inconsistent or something, to me it's like, it's kind of, you made the admission here, and the notion that you would split the baby on a highly transformative use, right? Highly transformative. And not only that, the complaint says it's certainly the case that Denims makes a highly transformative use of the nuke. That's factor one, baby. And you can't really split the baby on that, right? So it's highly transformative in that it was trying to radicalize, but only in these like very specific parts of it. What? How does that make any sense? So on its face of it, I think this is a damning admission. Again, query whether it will resolve the case. But imagine just going up to the judge and saying like, listen, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're leading the brief with this. Plaintiff concedes that Denims made a highly transformative use of the nuke. Well, isn't that factor one? You know? And then you use the term exact opposite purpose. It really does sound like a bad admission. Again, ultimately, I'm on the 78% line for other reasons unrelated to this, but I don't think that this is a good thing to have had in the complaint. Denim's use of the nuke as the object of contemporaneous criticism and debate, regardless of the substance of the views expressed, is paradigmatically transformative. The portions of the nuke used by Denims were tied to that critical purpose. And the complaint does not plausibly articulate how Denim's live stream constitutes a market substitute, nor can it, given the intrinsic differences in the consumer profile for Klein. So you'll start to see how these different factors, right? We have one is the use and character of the purpose and character of the use, right? So purpose and character of the use. Factor two is the nature of the copyrighted work, right? The underlying work. Three is the amount and substantiality. And four is market substitute and the kind of market concerns. These kind of bleed into each other, right? Because the more this is not like the Ethan video in that it's highly transformative, the more it's like that, the less likely you are to disturb a pre-existing market for the video. You get me? So that's why these kind of merge a little bit. Two is kind of a little bit self-standing, a little more in an island. But three, the amount and substantiality, that's also related to the purpose and character of the use. Excuse me, sorry. Sometimes it's going to be justified to use more of the work depending on what the end is. Right? And also, it's not unheard of for you to use all of a work and for it to be fair use. If you think about the way that different courts have come out in favor of AI, where they're using all of the work to train their models. Yeah, they're using all of the work, but they do so in a way that is highly, highly transformative. It's certainly not a market substitute to be like, well, I wanted to get Harry Potter, but then instead I got ChatGPT. I'm like, okay, this seems a bit attenuated there. And maybe there's a really good reason, a need to use all of the works when you're scraping for data for your AI thing, you know? Given the intrinsic differences in the consumer profile for Klein, producer of the Nuke and outspoken supporter of Israel and the Israel-Palestine conflict, on the one hand, and the allegedly alt-left Denims, who, according to the complaint, and like Piker, has openly expressed pro-Palestine ideologies and whose evident mission in reacting to the nuke was to rebut the view of Klein and advance her own and Piker's, right? This is, I think, really smart framing by Denim's lawyers, is to make this as intractable. The difference is classical almost, right? It's Israel-Palestine. We have Israel versus... How can you say that they're not highly transformative? You're taking something that's pro-Israel and converting it into something that's pro-Palestine, or like pro-Hassan Piker or anti to pro, right? So I like that framing. I think that's like a useful framing. And using a lot of the, of Ethan's and his lawyer's own words here. Denim's live stream is classic fair use under 17 U.S.C. 107. On these facts, Denims did not commit copyright infringement as a matter of law. Judgment on the pleadings is warranted. We're going to skip the factual section and get right into fair use. And we're also going to skip the legal standard here for judgment on the pleadings. Okay. The court should grant Denim's motion for judgment on the pleadings applicable fair law and fair use. Fair use is an equitable rule of reason, right? The statute, the copyright statute, was incorporating prior like judicial equitable rules that existed pre the current modern incarnation of the statute that permits courts to avoid rigid application of copyright statute when on occasion it would stifle the very creativity which the law is designed to foster. This is citing the Google v. Oracle decision. It's a Breyer decision. The fair use of a copyrighted work for purposes such as criticism, right, comment, news reporting, etc., is not infringement, and the four non-exclusive factors are purpose and character, nature, amount of substantiality, and the effect on a potential market substitute. So I said that correctly, and I even numbered them correctly. Okay. Citing the Dr. Seuss versus Comic Mix LLC case out of the Ninth Circuit. So we're in California, so Ninth Circuit applies. And this is a general balancing principles. Fair use is a flexible concept, and its application may well vary depending on context. The four statutory fair use factors should not be viewed as discrete questions, isolated from one another, but as interrelated issues contributing to a holistic inquiry. That's why I kind of say when the inquiries kind of bleed into each other, they're not totally separated from each other. They relate to each other. Here we have the Campbell case. This is from the Supreme Court. Nor may the four factors be treated in isolation, one from another. All are to be explored, the results weighed together in light of the purposes of copyright. So this is just a general overview on the standard for fair use. When the copyrighted work and the alleged infringement are both before the court, capable of examination and comparison, non-infringement can be determined on a motion for judgment on the pleadings. Materials attached to the complaint are incorporated into the complaint and therefore may be considered on a motion for judgment on the pleadings. So you're allowed to resolve this right now. Denim's use of the nuke constitutes fair use. So factor one, purpose and character of the use is highly transformative, outweighing any incidental commerciality. So another part of, in addition to transformativeness, and transformativeness is not the only thing to consider for factor one, right? Factor one also has this commercial versus non-commercial thing, non-commercial. So you can think of factor one as containing two big concepts, other concepts potentially as well, but two huge concepts, which are whether it's transformative and whether it's commercial or non-commercial. Okay. The first factor, and transformativeness is the sine qua non, or I should say, no, it's not the sine qua non. It's the quintessential factor. It's one of the most important factors. The first, really a sub-factor within factor one. Okay. The first factor weighs decisively in favor of fair use. Denim's live stream transformed the nuke from one-sided advocacy into the subject of live, unscripted debate and criticism that offered our audience a fundamentally different purpose, character, and perspective on the subject matter. The first statutory factor examines the purpose and character of the use, including whether such use is of a commercial nature or is for non-profit educational purposes. This factor has taken on a heightened significance because it influences the lens through which the court considers two other fair use factors, the third and the fourth. The central inquiry under the first factor is whether the new work is transformative. The term transformative does not appear in Section 107, yet it permeates copyright analysis. Transformative works add something new to an existing work, endowing the first with new expression, meaning, or message, rather than merely superseding the objects of the original creation. The second part of the fair use factors involves whether the new use is commercial, whether the user stands to profit from exploitation of the copyrighted material without paying the customary price. Thanks for the follow. Critically, the more transformative the new work, the less will be the significance of the other factors like commercialism that might weigh against the finding of fair use. They're all related, right? And the more transformative, the less you're going to get any points on commercial, the less you're going to get points on market substitute. In this complaint, Ethan alleges Denims' use was highly transformative. Boom. The first piece of evidence is paragraph 70 sub O. Remember how insanely long the complaint was, and how there were paragraphs that had sub numberings up to O and even beyond that. It's crazy how unprofessional, in my view, and unhinged the initial complaint was. This is the quote directly. Denims makes a highly transformative use of the nuke because where the nuke seeks to expose how Hassan radicalizes people online to be anti-Semitic and anti-Israel, Denims attempts to use the nuke for the exact opposite purpose. Let's go to the footnote here. Judicial admissions are formal admissions in the pleadings which have the effect of withdrawing a fact from the issue and dispensing wholly with the need for proof of the fact. And so what Denims lawyers are arguing here is a strong version of this admission. In other words, what are they arguing? Denims lawyers are arguing that not only is this strong evidence, this quote, that the work is transformative, it's dispositive. In other words, it's taken it out of you're not even allowed to consider, right? You don't even have to consider whether or not it is or not, right? They have admitted that it is. They have conceded it, in other words, like a formal concession that it is, in fact, highly transformative. You understand me? So if that's how the court interprets it, and query whether they'll interpret this quote as an admission, a judicial admission, that the work is indeed highly transformative, that would be very, 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 very bad for Ethan's case specifically. And it would be a way, by the way, to avoid certain difficult questions regarding online reaction commentary, is to just construe this as a judicial admission and avoid any further analysis. Now, I happen to think it's unlikely that the court will ultimately do that. The reason is I think that the courts are likely to be, again, I'm a realist before I'm a formalist in some sense. I think the courts are likely to be sensitive to the needs of rights holders in this environment and how many markets exist for non-political commentary related streaming, right? In a sense, why would there be a rule that immunizes, say, for example, Ethan Klein from the same protections that someone like CNN or UFC could get? In other words, my inclination, my thought process is that these kinds of reaction streams use up an insane amount of works, like full reaction streams. And in general, it's hard for me to envision a court countenancing it in the context of video content online. And if they do, it would be like, it would be quite dramatic if that rule were applied consistently to other forms of online video content. You know? Now, maybe this is separate because you'll be like highly critical, but like really just imagine that there were like a movie where in between people would stop and just like do biting criticism or something. I'm not so sure that that's the kind of precedent that the court wants to set. It's a highly realist application here of an analysis. I would hasten to add that there's not been a ton of precedent that's directly factually analogous to what we're seeing here. But my priors on like distinguishing a pre-edited, pre-scripted, deliberately selected style of reaction content, basically the quote unquote watch party versus non-watch party, which was not really fully sussed out in the New York case, the SDNY case that Ethan brought up before. My bias is in the context of California courts towards rights holders when it comes to live streaming. And I think the indications that we've had from courts that dealt with this issue have made it clear that just because some of these videos that incorporate other videos, just because some of them are okay, doesn't mean that they necessarily all are. But yeah, I could be totally wrong on that, Raid. But you could kind of avoid all that by just construing this as a judicial admission. The complaint's own allegations and the live stream itself confirmed Denims' use was highly transformative. So independent of the admission, here's why it's transformative. In the reaction live stream, Denims, among other things, offered commentary on the Uyghur genocide and Chinese authoritarianism, challenged Ethan's framing of the Houthi movement and the hijacking of the Galaxy leader, contested Ethan's portrayal of Hezbollah and its former leader Hassan Nasrallah, disputed Ethan's account of the events of October 7th and the evidence of sexual violence, critiqued Ethan's discussion of Twitch's enforcement and moderation decisions, offered counter-arguments regarding the relationship between Zionism and Judaism, commented on the production quality, editing, and rhetorical techniques of the nuke itself, and even cited extrinsic sources, including a Wikipedia article and video clips to support her position. The undisputed purpose of Denims' livestream was to contest, comment on, and also mock TI's message, rather than just to rebroadcast it, which is textbook transformative use. I want to now give you my opinion about what the law should be. Okay? What I wish the law would be. I think this kind of thing should be protected. That's what I think the law should be. But I'm just not, I just don't have a good, I'm not convinced that's what's going to happen. But it is, I think this is like an effective piece of legal advocacy. Citing the Equals 3 LLC versus Junkin Media Incorporated case, even if plaintiffs' episodes are not parodies, the episodes comment upon or criticize defendants' videos. Plaintiffs' episode directly respond to and highlight humorous aspects of defendants' videos. The episodes do so via the host's reaction to videos, jokes, narration, costumes, and graphics. The difference there is, I think this is Ray Williams Johnson, right? Is this Ray Williams Johnson? He had like very segmented videos, right? He had like he would like pick out clips just like Ethan did in the Bold Guy video. And then citing the Klein case itself. Reaction video was quintessential criticism and comment constituted fair use. Let's see the footnote. The complaint concedes content which intersperses short segments with criticism and commentary, like what Denims did here, is generally considered fair use. So that's the question, right? Number one, is this like that? And if it's not like that, is it nonetheless protected, even if it's not like this? And that's the tough question. As such, Denims' criticism of the nuke is at the heart of the fair use doctrine. It would lose meaning without reproduction of plaintiff's video. See Stebbins versus Alphabet Incorporated, reaction piece reproducing the entirety of plaintiff's work was protected by fair use. Warhol, commentary criticism that targets an original work may have compelling reason to conjure up the original by borrowing from it. Ted attempts to minimize this reality by characterizing Denims' reaction as surface level and misinformation and unsubstantiated. I just don't think that's relevant. I agree with defendant here. It's not relevant. The fair use inquiry does not ask whether the criticism is accurate or just or mean-spirited, but simply whether it's the kind of thing that the copyright statute is designed to protect. The crux of the post, this is citing from the Weinberg versus Dirty World LLC opinion, the crux of the post is to provide social commentary, albeit unsavory and uncouth, and criticism. This is the exact type of critique that falls within the scope of the fair use doctrine. Whether Denims' commentary was correct, sophisticated, or to Ted's liking is ultimately irrelevant to the transformative inquiry. I agree 100%. Moreover, the inquiry under the first factor focuses on whether the new work merely supersedes the objects of the original creation, supplanting it, or adds something new with a further purpose or different character. Quote, even an exact copy of a work may be transformative if the copy serves a different function. And when the secondary work has critical bearing on the substance or style of the original composition, the claim to fairness in borrowing from the work is at its strongest. Here, the purpose of the nuke and Denims live streams are undeniably distinct, if not diametrically opposed. This, I think, is true. The nuke advances a specific editorial message concerning Piker's purported radicalization of his audience with, quote, propaganda. The spirit of Denims' livestream took that thesis as its target and subjected it to real-time opposition and counter-arguments, at times in a mocking manner. TEI concedes this point by alleging Denims' attempts to use the nuke for the exact opposite purpose of the nuke's purpose. I mean, you couldn't use worse words in your complaint. It's a crazy admission. Are they the same purpose? Right? You're trying to see, was the purpose different? Did they supplant the purpose? Is it a different function? And in your own complaint, you say, Denims tries to use my piece of content for the exact opposite purpose. I almost think they should lose just on that admission alone. Don't even deal with like the harder questions. Just be like, sorry, you admitted it was highly transformative and it had the exact opposite purpose. Because defendants' use of copyrighted materials, and just again, reminder, this is just one part of the copyright case. I don't think this argument works for the countdown video or whatever. Because defendants' use of copyrighted materials serve a completely different function than that of the plaintiffs, the factor weighs in defendants' favor. I mean, it's just a very effective piece of legal advocacy. And I think, all right, so why do they make these admissions? Other than like incompetence or whatever. So let's try to come up with something plausible. You could argue, number one, maybe they were trying to take the sting out of the fact that it was like very clearly biting criticism. And so they were just trying to be upfront with it. But like, did you have to use the words exact opposite purpose or highly transformative, which are like the literal words for all these tests are the purpose and character of the work and whether it's highly transformative? So that's like taking the sting out of it thing is I think not a good reason why you would use those words specifically. Those like the exact legal phrases. I mean, it's wild. That's one plausible reason they would make those what I think are admissions. And then number two, maybe it's because of vanity, right? You want to go all in on the purpose, all in on your PR move strategy, right? Which is, I'm standing for reasonableness. I'm standing for a two-state solution. I'm standing for righteousness, and they're just anti-Semites. They're evil. So you're excessive, right? You're going too far. So like, other than that, what explains it? What the hell explains it? I'm sure if you asked them, I don't know, they would use different wording. That it's just so horrible of wording. You can make the same point without using that wording. By extension, when the original work advances an argument and the secondary work exists to challenge it, the two serve different purposes by definition. To illustrate this contrast, citing the Warhol decision, this is one of the most recent and important Supreme Court decisions on fair use. This is a Sonia Sotomayor opinion. It sounds like they're not suing on the grounds of how transformative it is. I mean, why would you concede that? If you concede it's highly transformative, then everything becomes so hard for you to win. Because if it's highly transformative, then how does it supplant your market? And how, if it's highly transformative and it, like maybe you lose on amount and substantiality or whatever, I just think it's a stupid admission, man. I don't know why you would ever say this. But yeah. So Warhol is the most recent decision on fair use, and one of the most important recent decisions on fair use. The court found that the first factor weighed against fair use because the particular use at issue, licensing a silkscreen portrait of Prince to a magazine for a feature story serves substantially the same purpose as the original photograph, which is also licensed as a photograph of Prince. Here, conversely, the nuke was created to persuade, whereas Denim's live stream was created to rebut. So contrasting the decision, in the Warhol case, they actually found, right, against fair use. I think that was the ultimate conclusion, no fair use. It didn't matter, right? One of the findings is the subjective intent didn't matter. That's what I've been pushing for a lot of time. Okay. And the contrast here is between, well, licensing pictures because of their aesthetic quality in a market that already existed for the Prince photo. Compare that to the nuke, where you have this entire polemic, this entire political strategy, this vision contrasted to the opposite vision coming forward. It depends on what level of generality that you're tackling it with, right? Because at some level of generality, well, if the same purpose is just to provide political commentary, right? However you define it might resolve it for you. If you take the purpose at the level of political commentary, well, then I guess, yeah, it's the same purpose because their purpose is both to persuade or their purpose is both to provide political commentary or whatever. But if you take the level of generality when it comes to purpose at the level of like your individual motive in the world, that is to say, one step more granular in deciphering the actual contents of the political opinion, then it's like the complaint says, exact opposite purposes. The different purpose, conceitedly different purpose, you might argue, conceitedly different purpose, crazy, is equally matched by a fundamental different viewing experience for Denim's audience. Where the nuke is a scripted, edited production presenting a linear argument, Denim's reaction was a live, unscripted broadcast in which she offered spontaneous reactions, engaged with her audience through a live chat, provided real-time commentary interspersed with tangential discussions and cross-act. Notice all of this also effectively. Number one, it's focused on the legal issues, and it's running an objective analysis. That is to say, it's not going into subjective intent. It's saying this is what the reaction actually was. It was live. It was unscripted. It was spontaneous reactions. It doesn't turn on her subjective intent and what she wanted to do. Why? Because Warhol instructs us. This is an objective inquiry. That's what I've been trying to like push into the minds of these snarkers, man. They just don't understand the snarkers. Her reaction ran 235 minutes, almost 2.5 times longer than the original. Some of Denim's pauses ran up to 8 minutes. Many ranged between 1 and 5. 4 times she pulled the nuke down entirely. Let's look at the footnote here. A bunch of timestamps. Courts confronting similar facts have found that this type of live, unfiltered commentary, which is a hallmark of live streaming medium, supports a finding of transformative use. Wow. I want to follow this. Wait, didn't I look up the Stebbins case? I think I looked up the Stebbins case. Ooh, I don't know if I did. I want to follow this pin site. Just give me 1 second. I'm from Transylvania. I don't know why that's in my head. Bela Lugosi. So this is 5 Westlaw 2233208. That's Stebbins. So I'm going to look into that. The live stream reaction, a fundamentally different experience. Like in Stebbins, Denim's live stream here served a completely different purpose, conceitedly opposite purpose, and provided a fundamentally different viewing experience for audience of the nuke. It cannot be genuinely disputed. Denim's reaction made a vastly transformative use of the nuke. The de minimis commercial nature of Denim's use is incidental and does not outweigh its transformative character. Denim's use was not sufficiently commercial to outweigh the transformative nature of a use. Ted alleges that the use was commercial, as Denims was eligible to have paid subscriptions, donations, advertising, all that stuff. But these allegations carry minimal weight. The commercial nature of the use is outweighed by the transformativeness. Whereas here the use is highly transformative, conceitedly so, commercialism recedes to the background of the analysis. And that has been my impression too of a lot of the case law. That this really is the most important sub-factor within factor one. Here we have the Hustler magazine case. Even assuming that the use had a purely commercial purpose, the presumption of unfairness can be rebutted by the characteristics of the use. Incidental commerciality outweighed by highly transformative nature of the live stream. In any event, the commercial aspects of Denims' live stream were incidental at best. Denims is a live streamer. That is her job. She's always eligible to receive subscriptions, donations, and advertising revenue during her Twitch broadcast, regardless of content. In other words, right, like an argument goes here, there's nothing special about the content nuke so far as revenue is concerned. It's not like she's exploiting some specific market. This is like the incidental commerciality or something. A commercial use is demonstrated by showing that repeated and exploitative unauthorized copies of the copyrighted work were made to save the expense of purchasing authorized copies. The revenue Denims is alleged to be eligible to receive from the reaction live stream was a byproduct of the platform on which she regularly broadcasts, not the direct product of exploiting the nuke. The commercial use factor concerns the degree to which the new user exploits the copyright for commercial gain, as opposed to incidental use as a part of a commercial enterprise. And here, right, like it's not like she was. I don't even think she made this a YouTube video, right? She did it one time and no other time. The fact that the nuke and Denims' reaction to it are based on the Israel-Palestine conflict and such matters, which are not only in the public interest but extraordinarily so, weigh in favor of a finding of fair use. When an act of copying occurs in the course of a political, social, or moral debate, the public interest in free expression is one factor finding in favor of fair use. So we found a case from the Ninth Circuit that suggests that as part of the transformative purpose and character finding, that you would consider whether it's a political, social, or moral debate. That's pretty good. It's a good find. The documentary and informational nature of the nuke favors fair use. And by the way, this is where the characterization by Ethan Klein, yeah, look, they mentioned it, tragic comic. They're trying to make it more artistic, right? And this is where the PR brain is pointed in one direction, and the legal brain is pointed in another direction, right? The PR brain wants to say it's all factual, it's all the receipts, it's all the time, right? But the more factual it is, the more the factor 2 favors the defendant. The legal brain wants to say artistic, expressive, right? You see that? Factual is less likely to be protected than non-factual. And so that's why you have the tragicomic documentary critiquing Hassan and Twitch. They're trying to make it into like a drama, right? And emphasizing that portion of it. The second section 107 factor, these are the fair use to statutory factors. So when you see 107, that's just the pin site to or a reference, a citation to the fair use statutory in the US Code, the statutory citation. The nature addresses two aspects of the work, right? Not the use, the work. So don't be confused, right? Factor 1 is about the use. Factor 2 is about the work, the underlying work. The extent to which it is creative, right? Creative versus factual. And whether it is unpublished. Well, it's published. And I guess it's not the most important factor. Factor 2 is rarely dispositive. Works that are creative in nature are closer to the core of intended copyright protection than are more fact-based works. Notably, the Ninth Circuit has found that this factor typically has not been terribly significant. In any case, TEI characterizes the nuke as a tragic comic documentary critiquing Hassan and Twitch. Even if tragic comic, the substance of the nuke is overwhelmingly documentary and informational. 6 of its 7 sections are devoted almost entirely to real-world events and constitute quintessential political discourse. The nuke does incorporate edited montages, but they indisputably serve the larger informational purpose of the rest of the work. Let's look at the footnote here. The nuke was also published when Denims conducted her live stream reaction to it, which weighs in favor. Yeah, so it was absolutely published. So this is where I'll tell you where I find it. I think 2 factors in Denims. I think that one I would say is like neutral. On the one hand, you're watching the whole video, but it really, and this I think is driven more by less about what I want the law to be, and more like what I expect, given the amount used, and it's the whole thing, right? If you wanted to watch the whole thing, you could watch it there. If it were me deciding it, I would make this factor in favor of Denims. That's just me. But this is like, let's split what I would want the court to rule and what I expect. And I think I would expect more like neutral. Like a difficult issue. I don't think it's like a straightforward one. I think factor 2 decisively weighs in favor of Denims. This is the part, right, where I think the court will say Ethan. The big one for the work. But again, they relate to each other. So if the court were to find that this favored Denims, right? If the court found that this favored Denims, then this would be undermined some, right? And so the strength of it, it's usually not the most strong factor either, right? Factors 1 and 4 are the most important, then 3, and then finally like a distant 2. So it doesn't really matter that much. The Denims wins too. Let's be honest. And so yeah. It's that admission, man. Maybe I'm too down on Denims. I think 78 is fair. But maybe this is just like, it's really uncharted. A lot of this is uncharted. Can we just be real? The live stream stuff, a lot of it has just not been dealt with. So I'm riding a lot on my realist analysis here. I'm putting my realist hat on. And it led me astray before, but that is what's dominating, I have to say. But I will say this is a strong piece of legal advocacy. The third factor also weighs in favor of fair use finding and asks whether the amount and substantiality of the portion used in relation to the copyrighted work as a whole are reasonable in relation to the purpose of the copying. I mean, you used all of it. You did use the heart of the work. This analysis will harken back to the first fair use factor, which strongly weighs towards fair use, because of the extent of permissible copying varies with the purpose and character of the use. And quantity alone is not determinate. You used all of it. Here, Denim showed the entirety of the nuke on approximately 3/4 of her screen, and her live stream ran approximately 3 hours and 52 minutes. As discussed below, she prevails for at least 2 reasons. First, the copying was necessary to accomplish the transformative purpose, because the live stream was a real-time critique of the nuke. I always hate a lot of these issues in copyright become like a circularity issue, where if you're just defining the purpose in light of what, like, no, we wouldn't be able to achieve our purpose of the biting critique if we didn't use all of it, because our purpose was necessarily comprehensive. Like, we wanted to be a comprehensive takedown. I'm curious about like the circularity chicken egg issue there. Whereas, can you define your purpose in such a way as it encompasses the entirety of the work and thereby just like win every time on amount and substantiality? You get me? To comment and critique a work, clips of the original may be used, because without actually using clips, the commentary and critique would lose context and utility. She could not have offered a running critique of the nuke, its factual claims, political arguments, rhetorical techniques, and editorial choices without showing what she was reacting to, and thus her criticism, by its nature, required reference to the original, all of it. See Stebbins. This is the case I want to follow up on. The defendant copied literally every last second of the original, but the clips of the original and the commentator's live reactions were essential to the creative work because the clips provided context. Factor did not weigh against fair use. And here's another reason why a ruling could be dangerous for the React community, as I identified. So you know this if you already watched my review of this content, which is, imagine that you have a ruling here that like Denims loses on this factor, which I think is likely. It's what I think is likely. Then you're basically saying that other streamers are going to lose this factor if they watch the whole thing of a video. Or at least that's adding additional precedent in that direction. And so is that really in the best interest of the React community? To win? And to the extent that Denim's live stream parodied or mocked the nuke, fair use allows taking a work's heart in order to conjure up the original and achieve one's parody purpose. Parodic purpose? Okay. Second, the ratio of commentary to original confirms that copying was well tailored to a critical purpose. The nuke ran 1 hour and 42 minutes. Denim's reaction ran nearly 4 hours, more than double the nuke's runtime. The below demonstrative, created by charting the timestamps from the live stream, which is a part of the complaint, illustrates the relationship between the original and the reaction aligns with these legal principles, and that Denim's commentary and critique did not stop until the nuke was concluded. I mean, I think it's a good chart. It shows that there's a shit ton of reaction, right? Time, uninterrupted playback. $142.06, $354.46. The breadth of Denim's engagement and commentary is also reflected in the complaint's own characterization of the live stream, which alleged Denim's unique reaction to the nukes on topics from geopolitics to production quality to Twitch's moderation policy. The significance of the runtime disparity, despite that the nuke was shown from beginning to end, is even clearer when viewed through the lens of the first factor, as the additional 2+ hours represent time Denims spent pausing to mock and parody the nuke's rhetorical techniques, respond to her chat, pull up extrinsic sources, and engage in extended tangential discussions. In other words, because the extent of permissible copying varies with the purpose and character of the use, the quantitative amount of the nuke in Denim's livestream diluted by the volume of original content surrounding it. Is diluted, sorry. As such, the nuke was embedded within a far larger work whose predominant content was Denim's own commentary. In other words, the use of the full work is thus inseparable from the transformative purpose it serves, because the commentary cannot exist without the material being commented upon. I think everyone's question is like, what is the limiting principle here? What is the limiting principle? Could I just have a movie, music? That's shit. Call it reaction and call it a day. You know? Why are movies even required to get music licenses for shit that they put in their movies? Do you feel me? I think everyone is concerned with the limiting principle here. And so that's why I put this in favor of Ethan. Is I don't really see one. And Denim's live stream does not serve as a market substitute. The fourth fair use factor requires courts to consider the secondary's use impacts on the market for the original work and the market for derivative works, including the defendant's actions become unrestricted and widespread. Where the secondary use is not a substitute for the original and does not deprive the copyright holder of a derivative use, the fourth factor weighs in favor of fair use. While this factor may be the single most important element of fair use, it is settled that a transformative work is less likely to have an adverse impact. So basically, in my mind, this comes down a lot to how we understand the transformation aspect to it. Because if you find it to be transformative, and if you take seriously these admissions, a lot of the other stuff can get glossed over and dealt with at a separate time. YouTube videos are qualitatively different from music and films, but why though, is the question. Why? You have to say, YouTube videos are different than movies, right? The kind of thing that you would see in Ethan's video is different than a real documentary because they're different, right? They should be treated differently because, right? It's not a really straightforward and intuitive thing to me. You know? Music react channels. No one's questioning that a lot of these exist. The question isn't, do these channels exist? The question is, do they pass muster under the law? And in what context do they? So, generally free to the public, does that play any role? Oof, that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. Generally free to the public. Music is generally free to the public by the same token, right? YouTube songs are released usually in their full form on YouTube. Yeah, but kind of different, right? It's not a full... We have very different usages of Hassan's work. That one is much more easy to analogize to to the Bold Guy video. And on the radio, yeah. So for me, the toughness, why I can't get fully on board with Denims is answering that question, the limiting principle. I can see a limiting principle when it comes to the Bold Guy video. I don't know that I can see one with respect to live reacts in this manner. And that's why, and I just mean as a matter of law. I don't mean like as it should be, you know? I almost think that we need a more updated code to like account for different genres and to put like, all right, for this genre, this, but then the problem there is like, what do you classify as what genre, right? And things kind of fuse. It's a difficult question. The inquiry is whether secondary use serves as a market substitute for the original. For instance, a lethal parody like a scathing theater review kills demand for the original, but does not produce a harm cognizable under the Copyright Act. The role of courts is to distinguish between biting criticism that merely suppresses demand and copyright infringement which usurps it. A defendant usurps the original work's market when the infringer's target audience and the nature of the infringing content is the same. Ted alleges that Denims intended and succeeded to provide a market substitute for the nuke. Intended, there's that word. Pointing to vague statements by Denims or her viewers, suggesting that they watched the live stream in lieu of watching the nuke directly. The timing of the live stream relative to the nuke's release and conclusory allegations of lost views and ad revenue. But this conflates demand suppression with market substitution. Even if Denims' criticism dissuaded viewers from watching the nuke directly, that is at most biting criticism that suppressed demand, not copyright infringement which usurps it. That seems kind of conclusory as well. Why is it dissuading as opposed to suppression? Not super convinced by that statement. That seems conclusory. Denim's subsequent comments on the issue illustrate the point. They wanted to see someone who would disagree with what the nuke would say. Okay. I think that's a better... So, the reason it's biting criticism that would suppress demand as opposed to usurping demand is they're not interested in the video full on. They're interested in someone who would disagree with the video. And that's the reason they would watch our video. That's assuming that they otherwise would have watched the nuke, I guess. So they don't even... I don't think that they concede that there's a market effect here. But if there is, it's one of biting criticism and suppression as opposed to usurpation. Here, Denim's live stream cannot plausibly serve as a market substitute for the nuke. Anyone seeking to watch the nuke, a scripted, edited 1 hour and 42 documentary presenting a linear argument, would have had a totally different experience watching Denim's nearly 4-hour fragmented start and stop live stream, which featured relentless, spontaneous reaction, live chat interaction, tangential discussions, extrinsic source material, and critical comments throughout. And here we're citing the direct quote. This is effective too. You're citing the direct quotes. And I remember this quote from the Bold Guy case. Anyone seeking to enjoy the original on its own will have a very different experience watching the reaction video. I think that's very good advocacy here. You get in the direct quotes that are trying to make the point you're making from the cases. Trey Sona versus Burbank. A person wishing to purchase the sheet music from Magic in order to play or perform that song would necessarily purchase the sheet music for the song itself from the owner of the performance rights, not the sheet music for Rainmaker. To this end, the presentation itself is fundamentally distinct in that the live stream occurred on Twitch, an interactive chat-centric streaming platform, as opposed to a pre-made YouTube video, and a large section of the screen depicts Denims in her live chat, evidence seen on its face the fundamentally different market function served by the live stream. Moreover, the audiences for the two works are not coextensive. It is flatly implausible that viewers who tune in for live rebuttable content might be the same or overlap with the constituency who seek the original documentary. I don't agree with that. Why is that not plausible? It's implausible? That's implausible? Why is that implausible? I'm sure there are people who watch both. I'm sure there's a lot of people who watch both. Maybe not in specific Denims community, but I'm not convinced by this statement. I do agree with the second part, particularly given the polarity of both the content and the actors. Indeed, by alleging Denims using the nuke for the exact opposite purpose, they acknowledge that Denim's live stream targeted a fundamentally different audience that was interested in criticism rather than endorsement. And here you see the same quote being worked on for multiple different factors. So we saw this quote for factor 1 where it is most appropriate, I think, but it's also appropriate here where we're, questioning the market substitute effect. The concession also flies in the face of Ted's claim of lost views and ad revenue, which is also simply implausible. All right, conclusory, and which the court should disregard as conclusory. Well, they're both conclusory, right? I guess the burden of proof is on Ethan making the claim. And devoid of facts suggesting a single Denims viewer would have otherwise watched the nuke directly. I think you would need to have some kind of like market evidence, some like expert market evidence or some kind of like way to calculate that. I think it's a bit much to just assume it. And to the extent that it's just assumed and conclusory, I guess I don't have an issue with Denims being like in a conclusory fashion. No, it's not. There is no rational basis for Ted's conclusory claim that an audience who tuned in for Denims' critical scoffing and alt-left leaning reaction would have watched the nuke directly. Ted alleges that Denims' audience is similar or the same to Piker's, the most prominent alt-left streamer on Twitch, alleging Denims leeches off of Piker's audience. There is no rational basis, I already read that. For instance, in the Hughes case, the court addressed this exact issue and found that the fourth factor weighed in favor of fair use. Defendants' target audience, generally political conservatives and libertarians, is obviously not the same as plaintiffs' generally political liberals. Moreover, although SJW levels of awareness is comprised entirely of portions of We Thought She Would Win, there's no reason to think that plaintiff's audience will abandon her progressive YouTube channel to watch the derisively titled SJW levels of awareness on a conservative YouTube channel. Ah, that's a good citation. Damn, I think I'm coming around on this factor. I don't know. Finally, Ted's allegation that Denims' conduct did become widespread does not change the analysis. To support this allegation, Ted merely alleges that several other members of Hassan's waiting room conducted a group viewing session immediately after its release that is not unrestricted and widespread use, and these separate alleged sessions apparently occurred at the same time at the live stream. Even if the practice of reacting to the nuke became or were to become sufficiently unrestricted and widespread due to Denims' live stream, it remains utterly implausible that the market for the nuke itself, standing on its own via the YouTube channel, would be materially effective for the reasons discussed above. The factor weighs in Denims' favor. Damn. Yeah, I don't know if I'm convinced that I'm just like trying to apply it to a sports broadcast is different because we don't have that same purpose thing. So like people would actually go to some asshole who's streaming the Arsenal game to watch it with his face in the corner. But they're both like they're watching it together, right? The audience is like the same for those two. For the guy who wants to they're both like interested in soccer, right? I don't know, man. I'm like more convinced this is in Denims' favor. Nice and short too. Nice and sweet. 21 pages. What it should be. All right, let's go to the op. Here's the op. As I mentioned, by the way, you can't just not argue all the factors, right? Another reason why it was implausible that this is going to be in the benefit of the React community or whatever. You got to argue all the factors. The motion must be denied because Denims cannot show that she made a fair use of the nuke at all, let alone as a matter of law. The motion fails because it ignores material allegations, mischaracterizes others, and glosses over the videos at issue and proceeds on a complete misunderstanding of the legal issues in this case. The central question in this case is not if Denims commented on the nuke. The question is whether its extent was sufficient to justify commercially exploiting the nuke in its entirety immediately upon its release. Okay, yeah, thank you so much for the follow. So this is where I'm hung up on. The entirety aspect to it. But it sounds like you're kind of like giving ground a lot on purpose and character, which is one of the most important factors. So, yeah. Denims cannot dispute that she commercially exploited the nuke immediately upon its release. I mean, true. Such use presents the greatest threat to the core concern of fair use, substitution. Public interest in the nuke was at its apex immediately before release. Consequently, any unauthorized exploitation at that time posed the greatest risk of siphoning demand away from the original work. The thing is, though, I think you need evidence for this. And maybe that's a reason why this shouldn't be resolved on judgment on the pleading stage. Maybe I'd be convinced of that. But I think you need evidence to suggest that this is the case, right? That there was, in fact, a great risk. And anything you want to say about self-serving statements, which I, contend that they're not even relevant for the intentional stated siphoning or whatever. I mean, Ethan's admission that he wanted it to occur, to the extent that intent is relevant at all, I don't know, man. The commercial exploitation of a work immediately upon release also undermines the assertion that the work is being used for a fundamentally different. No. Okay, so you're totally backing away. So we have you on the record. You say, quote, highly transformative use, exact opposite purpose. And now you're like, well, you release it at the same time. And so, but what do you make with your statements? How do you explain those statements? Damn, those are just, I bet they could withdraw those. I bet they wish they could withdraw those. If Denim's primary purpose was to criticize the nuke, there's no reason she had to do so immediately upon the nuke's release before anyone could watch it. To the contrary, her criticism would have benefited from waiting. Huh? So what do you think the primary purpose was? But then you're going to say it's to siphon views. But that's just relying on a subjective analysis. And we're told the test is objective. That's Warhol. That's Warhol, baby. So the evidence that it's to siphon views is what? Because it happened right after it was released? That proves too much. That means any reaction that's done immediately after a video is dropped has the purpose to siphon views as primary. I think that proves too much. It proves too much. It's too forceful, too strong of an argument. It would apply to so many other people. I'm not convinced by that at all. I think you need to go through the work of the objective features of the content itself. Rather, the timing of Denim's exploitation of the nuke reveals her primary purpose to commercially capitalize on the public interest in the nuke. She achieved this purpose by hosting a watch party of the nuke to siphon views away from the original to herself. Denims even stated as much on multiple occasions, and her exploitation was consistent with those statements. This is quintessential commercialism under the first factor and market substitution under the fourth factor. Denim's failure to comment on significant and substantial portions of the nuke further undermines her claim that her primary purpose was to criticize it. I think you're conceding. I think this is a concession. No legal citation here. Maybe we'll get some when we actually get into the actual body here. This is just the introduction. So I would want to see a legal citation for this. I assume there will be. I think that there's a concession here at a bare minimum that parts of this reaction stream are highly transformative. And I mean, that's not even up for debate because they said as much. So you understand how framing that puts you in an inherently weaker position. Because it's like, no, we agree that was highly transformative. That was highly transformative, but just not the whole thing. Not enough of it was highly transformative. And maybe that follows. That could follow. I'm not saying that it's even something I would, like I said, my bias here is still in favor of infringement. But I just know it's just like an unforced error. Whereas here, the use's transformativeness is inconsistent, right? So it's admittedly, conceitedly highly transformative nature at various points is inconsistent. The claim to fair use diminishes significantly. More specifically, it demonstrates that any critical purpose was ancillary. It was ancillary? So the desire to, wait a second, the desire to radicalize her audience to be anti-Israel along with defending Piker and anti-Semitic in this legal filing is ancillary. That's ancillary. It wasn't the primary purpose of the work to, quote, radicalize Denims' audience to be anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, and defending Hassan Piker. My. Further, the failure to comment on significant and substantial portions of the nuke, in whose eyes, right? Denims did not need to show all of it or most of it, let alone immediately upon release. This is the part that I'm most on Ethan's legal side with. But I just think that implicates so many other people, including Ethan himself. Right? Ethan himself. And it goes to show you the level of hypocrisy now. When you get to the actual moral aspect of it, if what you're going on is this, then Ethan is one of the biggest hypocrites there is, right? It is also undisputed that the moderators of the H3 Snark subreddit directed users of H3 Snark to Denims' watch party and offered it as a substitute for the original. The H3 Snark mods have a history of providing H3 Snarkers unauthorized substitutes. They even say that the purpose of doing so is to deprive them of views. Stated purpose, right? Here we have stated purpose. And how does this bear on Denims' purpose, right? Like, think about that. Here we're talking about purpose. How does the H3 Snark's conduct bear their subjective intent, let alone Denims' subjective intent? You know, it's my position, and I've, opened the debate to anyone who'll have it on this issue, that even Denims' subjective intent is not relevant to factor one, let alone in the other factors, in my view. How do these parties, the H3 Snark mods, how does their subjective intent bear on factor one? If it's objective with respect to Denims' intent, that is to say the user's intent, the one who's using and actually copying, right? How is someone who's not that person's intent relevant there? I don't know. Is purpose synonymous with a no? So no, right? The term from the statute is the purpose and character of the use. Intent, right? Intent is not an element here, right? If we go to the copyright statute, you're not going to find that hang on, let me just they actually might have the word intent in there, but it's not a subjective intent is what I'm trying to say. All right, sorry. You might find that, and I'm not even going to check it because I don't want to. You know what? I'll check it. Let's go to the section 107 copyright. Oh wait, was I right? Yeah, I was right. I have to stop doubting myself. Why do I do this? Why do I doubt myself? Yeah, hang on. Notwithstanding the provisions of Section 106 and 106A, the fair use of a copyrighted work, including such use by reproduction in copies or phonorecords or by any other means specified by that section for purposes such as criticism, such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research is not an infringement of copyright. In determining whether the use made of a work in a particular case is fair use, the factors to be considered include the purpose and character of the use, including whether such use is of a commercial nature or is for non-profit educational purposes, blah, 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 blah. So what is the distinction here, right? You don't look to the intent of the user, right? You go to the purpose and character of the use. In other words, it's an objective test. It's not a subjective test. And we know this directly from the Warhol decision. In fact, I'll just bring up that decision so that you know I'm not lying to you. Why don't I just prove it? Why don't I just prove this to you? This is the Supreme Court. This is Sonia Sotomayor writing for the court. So first of all, this is I think this is not actually the Supreme Court opinion. This is the syllabus. So it's not, always be aware of this, right? You're not ever wanting to quote directly from the syllabus. Fair use is an objective inquiry into what a user does with an original work, not an inquiry into the subjective intent of the user or into the meaning or impression that an art critic or judge draws from a work. Objective. But let's just make sure in the actual opinion. Boom. That's the opinion of the court. Whether the purpose and character of a use weighs in favor of fair use is an objective inquiry into what use was made, what the user does with the original work. Emphasis on does, not what they intend, what they does, what they does. Okay? So that's why I've been on my high horse talking about that this whole time. The Honorable Sally Kim agreed in her April 29, 2026 order denying the H3 Snarks motion to quash. It found that TED alleged and proved that H3 Snarks mods directed potential viewers of the nuke to view Denims' watch party as a substitute for the original. I think that's overstating the. I looked for this order. I'm not sure that it found. I'm not sure that it found that as a matter of law any particular fair use finding. And maybe it proved that the H3 Snark mods did this factual thing, actually. But I don't know. They didn't find that it wasn't fair use or that they had any intent that was relevant to fair use analysis. That's all I'm saying. But maybe it did find that these findings of fact for the purposes of the subpoena motion. But that's crucially not a fair use determination. Denim's audience even stated that they were viewing her watch party as a substitute for the original. Again, why is that relevant? This is all Warhol shit, right? An art critic might say something. The users might say something. We're not supposed to be taking a look into what the plebs are saying or even what the artist is saying. It's an objective inquiry. I guess judges are figuring that out. Denim's chat is littered with people thanking her for hosting a party. Denim's chat demonstrated there was a massive exodus of viewers after finishing the nuke. Again, I don't see that as incompatible with what the Denim's attorney set forth. All right, we can skip the background. Let's get to the legal stuff. All right. Fair use in general. The fair use doctrine confers a privilege on people other than copyright owner to use copyrighted material in a reasonable manner. We have the 4 factors. No bright line rules. Okay, so basically very similar standards on fair use. The first factor relates to the problem of substitution. The central question is whether secondary use adds something new. The mere fact that a secondary use has some further purpose or adds something new does not render such uses fair. The mere fact that it has some further purpose, rather whether an allegedly infringing use has a further purpose or different character, is a matter of degree, and the degree of difference must be weighed against other considerations like commercialism. The degree of difference must be weighed against other considerations like commercialism. When, as here, the purpose of the works overlap, the secondary use does not serve an entirely different function than the original. Ooh. But where are the allegations? You're trying to... So, in the reply brief, which I don't know if we're going to have time to read, but it's actually a great point by Denim's lawyer. That I put in my tweet. Control F, amend. In opposition, TED reverses course and claims the purposes of the works overlap, but they indisputably do not. Plaintiff cannot amend pleading in opposition brief. The court need only view Denim's livestream, consistent with Denim's real-time recognition that her viewers wanted someone who would disagree with the nuke, to distinguish the wholly disparate purposes. On this particular score, Ted is correct that what Denims says or thinks or feels is relevant to the fact of what Denims did. So you're conceding. I think this is wrong. Why does what Denims say or feel relevant? Why would you concede this? I think this is stupid. This is not true. This is false. Okay, but this part is funny. This part is funny. You already conceded that they had exact opposite purposes. Now you're claiming that the purposes, quote, overlap. And this is in your op page. Did they get the page number right? They did. Look at that. Page 8. Whereas here, the purpose of the work overlap. They do not serve an entirely different function. I don't know, man. I feel like you conceded that they had opposite functions, opposite purposes. The reply is very good. Yeah. I applaud Ethan's lawyers for not putting pictures of Hitler or Stalin showing restraint. Yeah. Does the fact that Ethan publicly opened his copyright to clippers affect these cases? Maybe for evidence purposes. I don't, but not really, right? Because this is like strict liability. Maybe there's like additional. Maybe they did collude or whatever, and there's some other cause of action. They did have opposite purpose. The first factor also relates to the justification for the use both in the broad. Oh my God, my voice just ended. Both in the broad and narrow sense. A use is justified in the broad sense if it has a distinct purpose that furthers the goal of copyright, namely to promote the progress of science and arts without diminishing the incentive to create. A use is justified in the narrower sense when it is reasonably necessary to achieve the user's new purpose. Such justification is particularly relevant to assessing fair use where wide dissemination of a secondary work would otherwise ruin the risk of substitution. Again, the question of justification is one of degree. Even uses set forth in the statute's preamble, like criticism and commentary, are not entitled to a presumption of fairness. That's as a legal matter, though. So let's be a little clear here. Let's go to footnote 7 here and make sure this is, since we're here. Return to the example of a book review. The reviewer's use of a quoted material may be justified in both the broad and narrower senses. First, the use is likely to serve a different purpose than the material itself. Second, there may be a compelling reason to borrow from the original to achieve that purpose because the review targets the material for comment or criticism. But again, the question of justification will depend on the individual use or uses. Even book reviews are not entitled to a presumption of fairness. I think this is why, essentially, I'm with Ethan on what's likely. Oops, I need to fix this. My bad. Right? Why would a book review... This is the court, right? This is Sonia Sotomayor for the court. And this is my issue with why I think Denims is going to lose. Why would a book reviewer have like less protection than a live stream reactor in this context? I don't know. Like, imagine a book reviewer who copies every single word of the book, publishes it, right? Like, so we have the entirety of the work. It includes the full book. And right next to the book's original text, let's say it's Lord of the Rings, you have like endless analysis, right? So you have the book and you have, for every page, there's 3 pages of analysis from the reviewer. Would we say that's fair use? Yeah, assume the book is twice as long. Well, let's say it's 4 times as long, but you include the whole book, right? To me, it's just disproportionate to the purpose. And that's where I agree with Ethan Klein and why I'm at 78% in favor of Ethan Klein is the disproportionality. No, I don't think you can just read a book on stream. No, yeah. Yeah, you could say, yes, read my review to save time. Don't read it. It sucks. I think that that's perfectly fine. That's why I think like intentional stated malice or whatever doesn't matter. But in the context of a book review, which is biting criticism and includes the full book in it, I don't think people would have trouble being like, yeah, you can't do that. And so that's kind of my analogy as best I can. And I know they're different media. They're different media. They're different mediums. I don't know what's the fucking plural of it. If I wanted to read the book, I wouldn't want to read that commentary. Maybe they're really fundamentally different media. I don't know. I was wildin'. Are you allowed to say that? Oh shit, it's late. All right, let's keep trudging along for just a little bit further. Let's see if we can find anything unhinged. But I largely agree with this proportionality thing. Further, when clips are played without much interruption, if any, or used in the excess of a benign purpose, such uses fail to sufficiently transform a work. Additionally, wholesale copying sprinkled with spoken commentary is at best minimally transformative. Also, voiceover does not necessarily transform work, nor does token commentary transform work. I don't think you can call this token commentary, bro. But I do think that you can say this is I like that book review comparison. I like that footnote. That is helpful for me. Moreover, the degree to which a secondary use has a different purpose or character must be weighed against them. Commercialism. We already looked at that. Here, Denim's use of the nuke was more akin to a group viewing session that did not serve an entirely different function from the original. Denim stated her purpose was to host a watch party to siphon views away from the original to herself. But look, right? This is my point. This is bad for you. They're literally citing a point that it proves my point. What a copyist says or thinks or feels matters only to the extent it shows what a copyist in fact does with the work. Citing Warhol. So, complete vindication to me. Ethan's own lawyers are citing that the subjective intent doesn't matter. It's only insofar as the copier does in fact do something. So I just don't understand how does it show what she did? Right? That seems to be circular. Right? If she didn't do that, the whole question is, did she do that? How did the words show that she did that? You know? The whole question is, did she do it? You can only consider her words or thinks or her thoughts or her statements to the extent that it shows what she did. But of course, you need to decipher that, right? I think that this proves my point. I think it absolutely proves my point. And that's what Warhol showed. I mean, it's just the unquestionable conclusion from Warhol. Warhol says, objective test. If it's an objective test, it's by definition not a subjective test. And so that's why it matters into what is done with the work. Oh, yeah. And then I'm just it's just, I can't ever doubt myself. It just is an objective test. And that's what this says. She titled it a watch party. Unfortunate phrasing from Denims. If we have to be fair and acknowledge that. She said she was watching the nuke. And this is where I think the reply was like, all right, you're just because I say these words doesn't mean that they are the thing. And I agree with that point too, right? Even if it's an unfortunate choice of words, it's not an unfortunate admission in the context of a litigation, right? There's a difference between a judicial or a legal admission and saying, oh, it's a watch party because it's labeled a watch party, right? Or it's siphoning because it says it's siphoning. Or it's it's a watch party because she says it's a watch party. If that would be stupid. That would be stupid. That would be stupid if that was the test. Can you imagine if that were the test? It's not, it's fair use. This is fair use. This is transformative. You were literally hearkening back to the memes, the disclaimer memes on YouTube, descriptions. They're making a meal of this siphoning part. Denim's use of the nuke was fully consistent with her statements. The timing of Denim's watch party evidences her purpose. but again, it's this is all focusing. I don't know. And in the reply brief, I don't know why they said this thing about what Denims says or thinks or feels is relevant to the facts of what Denims did. Why did you say that, man? I think that this was, you don't want to get into the game of making Denims statements relevant to the test. I think this is an L. Denims began her watch party of the nuke 1 minute after its release when public interest was at its apex. This belies Denims' assertion that she used it solely or primarily to criticize it. If this were true, Denims would have viewed it beforehand, outlined and researched her criticisms, and selected the portions she wanted to critique. Instead, Denims hosted a watch party immediately after its release before she knew individuals. Again, all of this analysis is focusing on her subjective intent, which, by the way, I kind of agree with. That, like, she presumed that she was going to disagree with the video, right? Well, I don't agree with this part, but if you really knew that you were going to disagree with the video and that was the purpose of it, presumably you would know what's in the video, right? And truth is, you probably can tell if it's coming from Ethan and it's criticizing Hassan, Denims is almost certainly going to be critical of it. But this kind of belies Ethan's analysis here, which I think is bad, right? This is just, in my view, this is bad analysis. This is great subjective intent analysis as an offer, right? If subjective intent were relevant, right? You're getting into Denims' actual head about what you wanted to do. That I think it's a missed opportunity. I really do think that the reply brief should have spent more time saying this isn't relevant. It would be ridiculous if this were relevant. It would be ridiculous if this were just like we were like asked to opine on the specific subjective mindsets of infringers. That's not what's envisioned by the statute. It's not what's instructed by Warhol. Yeah, this is like what's the sub for? Denims' statement that she was hosting a watch party is reinforced by 74 separate occasions where the nuke is played uninterrupted for 30 seconds or longer. Yeah, this I think is good for Ethan. Not saying that, like, just because. Can you imagine a situation where you don't have much to say about it? Like, I guess you would just be taking the risk then on Denims' vision, right? Let's say you had nothing of substance to say in these moments. You'd just be taking the risk if you're doing a live react. Because it doesn't matter what you intend to do when you go into it and you end up having nothing to say. It's what you actually do. That's what I would think. But this is the kind of stuff where I'm like, I just don't think it's going to fly. I don't think it's going to fly. I don't know. I'm not convinced that the court's going to allow for this amount of uninterrupted playback. This amount of times. For the whole runtime. Okay, I'm losing steam and I need to wake up tomorrow. Which sucks. I'm starting to have a lot of fun. Big takeaways, okay? Big takeaways. Just a very interesting set of briefing. I think some good legal advocacy by Denims' lawyers, except for this reply brief section. I wish I had time to go through everything on stream. I don't want to make this the Ethan Klein stream either. I want to go and do politics tomorrow morning and legal stuff if I have time, because I do have to wake up earlier. But I think this is bad. I think it's a big missed opportunity. Is to concede that what she says or feels is relevant. Maybe they're limiting it to just this thing to get like a little whatever one-liner in there. But I just don't think that they should have said that. I'm probably like super hyperfixated on that point because that's the point I've been arguing. So maybe it doesn't even matter. I want to preface it by saying I'm hyperfixated on that point because I get hyperfixated on my own arguments. But I also think it's relevant because look at how much time Ethan spends making a subjective intent analysis. I think you're able to undercut a lot of this being like everything that they have to say, even if we conceded, which we don't, that it's true. has nothing to do with whether there's a different character or purpose here under factor 1, because it's not relevant, because we're told that it's an objective test. You're able to undercut, I feel like, so much more if you just take that strong stance. So I know that I'm fixated on that point, and I want to put that out as a disclaimer. But I do think that it's just a much stronger position here, because look at, and it's not just for Denims. Their intent seems to be to try to make this about what the snarkers thought, what they said to each other, as opposed to what the work actually is. But the big update here is, I think these admissions are damaging to the case. And I thought that it was good legal advocacy for Denims lawyers to frame them as dispositive, to frame the overall purpose and character of the work relating to Israel-Palestine political issues. And yeah, I thought they did a really good job on the opening brief here. I still do think that Ethan has the edge, not just on this work, obviously on the Countdown episode. I think that he has the edge here too. But it's not like a open and shut for me on the fair use for the nuke. And I just wanted to update you all on that. But it does show, I think, it's bad for Ethan's claim of non-hypocrisy, for his claims of consistency, which were already fucking in pieces and tatters, and it was already bad for that. This just exposes him as an insane hypocrite on much of this stuff. But I do still think that he has the edge at the end of the day. For reasons related to limiting principles, for reasons related to some of the dicta in the Warhol case, for reasons related to what I think is a realist bias in favor of rights holders, especially in California. But yeah, that's my overall take. Pretty funny though. I don't really have time for questions, but if you guys have questions, put them in tomorrow's stream. I love you all very much. Thank you so much for the follows, for the likes, for the subs, all that shit. I wish I didn't have to go, but I should go to bed. Stay cool.